So, here we are again, and today it's a little bit something special, insofar that it is in connection with a meeting tomorrow in Brussels. Although saying tomorrow is not quite right from the time when it will be online, or when I will make it online. So what it is about, it is a meeting actually organized by the Euromemorandum Group and the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation, the office in Brussels. The one purpose is, of course, to present actually the Euromemorandum, which had been just published. It's a memorandum from economists looking at the European economic development and the state of the art and trying to develop alternatives. It had been organized by the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation, not least to have a wider debate that is not only encompassing economists, but really looking for a wide range of people who are supportive of an alternative economic policy. I'll come back later to this question about alternative economic policies. It's implicit. But one of the guiding questions I had been given as a panelist is, in your view, what policy intervention of ideas, what concepts has been missing in the years after the crisis? I won't be able to cover the entirety of the questions that should be involved, but I want to highlight some aspects which I think are important as well in terms of general issues about methodology, in terms of the analysis of our realities and what we as academics will do. Now, it is linked to this event. At the same time, my contribution there will be a different one. Here it's more really about a wider academic perspective. So the first point is, of course, after the crisis. Can we say, should we say we are after the crisis, or there had been any after the crisis? What we are facing, what we had been facing was, of course, a manifestation of a crisis. But the crisis as such is difficult to classify and difficult to put into a nutshell in terms of the time. And then the question is, what crisis are we actually talking about? In some way, we can say just a tiny thing seemed to have this huge impact: the collapse of the Lehman Brothers. Now, of course, the collapse of the Lehman Brothers, trying to develop a question, had been one important indicator, if we want, of a wider crisis, a banking crisis, a finance crisis, and of course then going further, a crisis of the entire economic system. And what we have to look at is the history of things. The history of things in different perspectives. The exact timing may be open, and I emphasize I want to leave it open here, but we are looking at a longue durée, at something that is developing over a long, long time, that is truly systemic. But beyond this systemic aspect, we have a history of events. Something small is happening, and this is a decisive moment in the history, confirming the structures, confirming the systemic development or contradicting. Now, saying I want to leave it open means as well that, of course, we are looking at the longue durée. In its original sense, it is really about a very long time frame that is basically completely out of control and figuration. That is really what we usually say, this is history. It doesn't matter, although we know it does matter. So longue durée has as well a different aspect here, and it is the entire development of what actually had been leading to this crisis. There had been little events, there had been longer term developments, but what I want to say here in terms of longue durée is something that had been characterizing a certain era historically. And then it is, of course, something where this kind of crisis, this kind of era, had been concerned not only with economic questions in the strict sense, but as economy is always about something wider, it is thinking about the world, the economy, what is the role of the economy in the world, what is the shape, the aim, the goal, the meaning of it. Looking at today's societies, it is of course a different question. When we then read in the Euromemorandum, in its title, it is, of course, we have in the memorandum, and we have in all these debates always these catchwords as neoliberalism and austerity. And then we come to this point which we discussed, popular. We are always talking about populism, and this is something we talk about criticizing what is going on there. And then we are talking as well about this populism, not under this heading or under this term, but as something where we said what we are looking for is the need for popular political economy. This was the headline, this was the guiding idea of this year's memorandum. The need for a popular political economy. Now, I am a supporter of this memorandum. At the same time, I want to ask in a very provocative way, what does this actually mean? In a society that doesn't have a populace anymore, in a society that, linking to Luhmann, that consists of communication, not of people. And it is not people communicating, but it is communication as such. And then we are looking at economy, which had been reduced on the existence of a torso. It is a commodity-obsessed body which does not really have anything to do with economy in the classical sense. Go back to all the classics in the economic thinking. There you find a much broader approach. And then we come finally to the structure of politics, where politics is by and large reduced to a nothingness of arbitrary functions, securing functionality of a system without really being about politics, without being about polity and the way of people organizing, people living together. Now, a little bit of history, and as I said, is in a way it's a longue durée, but it is not really longue durée in the classical sense. It is a little bit arbitrary. I could have started in 1969, of course. Possibly I should do it really briefly mention it, 69, 68, 69, the years standing for a upbreaking society. On the one hand, the huge protests. On the other hand, the collapse of the large entities emerging with the détente. It had been the German Chancellor kneeling down and asking for apologies for what the Germans did, German fascism, and it was the opening of an era to a new relationship between the two blocs. If I say it's an opening between the two blocs, we have 79. 79, Simone Weil is the first president, female president of the European Parliament, and it had been the first direct elections to the European Parliament. An anti-fascist, a feminist, as she is called, and we don't have to think about and to discuss these terms, what it really means, but it is at least something, a personality that is not the typical mainstream. Not only because she was a woman, the first woman, not only because it was the first direct elections to European Parliament. At the same time, the same year, 1979, we have Margaret Thatcher, famous under the name the Iron Lady, as first female Prime Minister of the island state, the UK. 10 years ahead, 1989, we face the so-called fall of the Berlin Wall, and there are different perspectives on this, different interpretations, different perceptions. Some say it's the imperial takeover. Some say it is the hegemony, a new hegemony. And I may add an interpretation of it is the dissolution of neoliberalism. The confrontation of the two systems came in some way to an end, but it was not the end of history, but it was the beginning end of neoliberalism, because now it had not been about liberalism at all anymore, but the liberal part fell away, and it was the open, the development, the emergence of an open, aggressive system of what is called free market. The free market then, in the European area that is called European Union now, again 10 years later, 1999, came to a new height, to a new peak, namely the introduction of the euro currency. It is established and the European Central Bank assumes full powers, full office. A decisive step for the entire process of European integration. Now I want to come to one aspect that is the periphery of Europe, not even the periphery of Europe, but in a way the periphery of the world we live in, and that is Latin America. Hugo Rafael Chavez Frias is or becomes president of Venezuela. Isn't it justified, if you look at the entirety of developments in Latin America and South America, isn't it justified to speak of a new movement that can be possibly called, it's the second decolonialization? And if so, if this is a second decolonialization, it is today under massive pressure from the side of the United States. 2 years ahead, 10 years ahead, but we change to the 21st century, 2009, G20 in London. I can add, it had been the 1st of April. And the aim was, after this manifestation of the crisis, that the G20 said we have to get serious about the process of reform so as to manage globalization as force for the good in the medium term. Mind, globalization happens. Now we have to manage it and we have to make something good out of it. There was not really any substantial statement in this. If we want, the only substantial issue had been the commitment to the Millennium Development Goals. There had been another more or less substantial issue, and that was a slight questioning of the hegemonic role of the United States. 2019, another 10 years, and we are ahead, and we are in the middle of this year, well, not even the middle, and of course, we cannot say what is really decisive in during this year. There had been the 20th of March, so a few days ago, something that is decisive or had been decisive. It had been the rejection of the EU digital tax during the council meeting. Now, there are different aspects to this, and I don't want to go into detail of this discussion. One aspect had been said, it is better to deal with these taxation of digital economy on the level of the OECD, on a global level. I would say this is an argument, although I come to another point in this connection as well. There was another argument brought forward, and this had been about it is better to tax products where they are consumed, or if they are consumed, when they are consumed, and it is not about taxation where these products are made. This is, of course, something very dubious, because then at the end of the day, you are sitting on the back of an entirely wrong and highly problematic approach to economics. It is production, it is not consumption, where we have now a very fundamental issue in economics, where we have the value theory and where we have the theory of marginality. These would be details, they are interesting, and I'm actually currently working on this and finalizing a book, hoping to get it out to the publisher in the next week, before I leave Łódź. A little present if you want. Now, as I said in the first point, it is better to deal with it on the OECD or on the global level. Right so. But what is actually the background, or what had been the background? The idea discussing this topic had been very much about national economic interests, and typically those countries with a strong export orientation had been supportive, where the others had been hesitant. There was a little, only very little interest in a European interest or formulation of a European interest. And there would have been at least an opportunity to say, okay, it is an issue we have to deal with on the global level, but we as European Union are in unity, going a certain way to think about it, to push forward a European strategy on this issue. Now, a second point from the introductory question, if you want, from the topic. What missing policy intervention or idea or concept? What was missing? And I think it is good to use this vague, it is about intervention, it is about ideas, it's about concepts. What was missing and what is missing? It is actually something I think very vague. It is a European identity, and it is meaning. Of course, meaning is this beautiful empty phrase because it is so wide that it, at the end of the day, doesn't mean anything. The loss of meaning by calling for it. But what I mean is something very different when it comes to meaning. It is, what is the meaning for everyday's life of people living there? This is actually the one ambition of the Euromemorandum that is issued every year, to look what is it when we talk about economic policy in terms of how people live. I just referred to a paper that had been recently published by the German government, the central government, and it is about the national and European strategy for industrial development. One point that we make as well in the Euromemorandum, that we need industrial development, that we need a development policy. But what the paper from the government, from the federal government actually does, is following this old computer wisdom, never touch a running system. So basically leave it as it goes and never question what it is actually about. Never ask why this system is running. Why is it running? Why are we talking about again and again the major values of inflation, of employment, of income development, of GDP? Of course, it is naive in some way to ask, why are we talking about income? Of course, we need income, we need money just to buy a bread, to buy clothes, and to buy shelter. It's without doubt a naive comment, actually. Isn't it naive not to ask questions, why are we doing what we are doing? What is with producing personalities and relations? We are not only producing commodities. Why do we have to buy everything? Anything that is not counted, calculated as part of the GDP doesn't count. It is not considered to be of any value. What is about these free markets, the free market society? We have monopolies, we have a state-subsidized sectors, many issues that are going on that had been developed by the monopolies are actually subsidized by the state, and we are producing not as individuals, but we are producing as socialized individuals within a context that is not completely, not entirely free for the individual to decide. And then we come to another point. European solidarity, again and again claimed. What is with policies that systematically undermine the development of productivity in certain countries, in certain regions, member states of the European Union, systematically undermines this development in favor of other regions to develop stronger? What is with starving children not being able to learn because there is not enough money for them to buy food. What is with ruined and further ruining social support systems, health, accommodation, childcare? If we talk in official talks about it, we talk about social investment instead of human beings. And if we talk about solidarity, we only talk about how much is paid back if a country, if a group is supported by another country, by another group, or in any way. So what I would say, what is missing with all this is a real analysis. And the Queen actually put her finger on this, possibly without knowing it really, when she asked at the LSE, how is it possible? There are so many intelligent people, economists, highly educated, they are sitting here and they had not been able to predict what was going on. The answer, it took actually a long time to get the answer in written form. There is a letter by the Academy sent to the Queen and saying basically what went wrong. We all looked into certain details, and there we had been actually correct and right, but we did not look at the connections. So what is missing? It is about these connections, it is about thinking in this larger area of contexts, of complexities, of connections. But it is as well about the wrong premises that we have in economics. A little bit from the textbook, we are talking about scarcity, we are talking about cost-benefit, we are talking about incentives matter, and we are talking about comparative advantage. And with this, we talk about opportunity cost, meaning rational individuals are thinking rational ways, are calculating what they want to do with their time, how they want to spend their time, and how they want to invest whatever they have. Sadly enough, in some respect, this is right. We are only these calculating, egoistic beings that are rational in this sense of everything has to be paid for, meaning everything we are doing has to be paid for as well. We had been made, to some extent, thinking this way. But at the same time, there is still something else. And we have to think, I think, in economics about exactly this. Not scarcity, but abundance. It is not about cost-benefit, but it is about benefit-cost relationships. We are first thinking about the benefit, and it is not about benefits for ourselves, but it is about benefits in terms of rights, in terms of human rights, in terms of what we as human beings need and have the right to, in terms of the abundance that exists. And then we are thinking, of course, as well about cooperative advantage. It is so much that is actually happening in one or the other form in cooperation, where we are looking not just at our individual benefit, advantage, but where we look at the advantage we have for all of us in terms of by cooperation, and advantage being something about progressing and being about sustainable. Given the mainstream paradigm, we see only this self-referentiality in terms of commodity production. It is this one focus only, commodity production, and commodity production, growth of commodity production will change everything, will bring benefits for everything and for everybody. It is nearly impossible to break out of this circle. And then we have the need, I'd say, for another circularity. I'm not too happy with this term used today. It is about heterodox economies. Yes, it is about heterodox economics. We have to think in a different way. But it is not about simply a different way. It is about a different way in terms of being concrete, in respect to what I said, everyday life of people. 2 points at the end. And there I'm very self-critical. Having been throughout my life, I think I can say, academic and professional. And saying this, I would say we tend to a certain arrogance, that we know it better, that we know the recipes. And of course, we have some knowledge. How should I say we don't? But there must be a way, and then I come to this popular, there must be a way to link this knowledge with what is really going on in people's life, what is really going on in societies, and it is a very difficult question. We cannot simply say, okay, everybody should have a say, simply because there are too many everybody's, but as well because there is some expert knowledge required. But at the same time, we have to look at a kind of, not balancing, but a kind of a realist approach as well in economics. Possibly that is an alternative to the term of heterodoxy. A second point, and this is something we are kind of struggling with for a long, long time. Economics is a social science. And as we usually have this division between social science and science, I would propose we may think as well about a little bit more about a division within social science. Social science, taking economics, taking sociology, taking jurisprudence. These are, if one wants, hard social sciences that are looking at laws, whatever it means, in society, in development, that of course depend on other social sciences as literature, as psychology, where it is more about understanding. History may be a little bit in between. Understanding what is going on, understanding the subjective side, understanding the actors. Whereas in the other area, I would say we are looking more at the hard contradictions, not at the beauty, but more at the beast. And then we have something from there, saying hard social science we should at the same time emphasize it is about social science. And about social science, it is not about technicalities. They play a role, and technically speaking, we may have, for instance, value chains. Something that is in the debate since a couple of years, that we look for contributions of different actors in the economy and looking how things are distributed. Realistically speaking, as I say, we have to leave the technical side aside. Realistically speaking, we are talking about poverty chains, establishing dependencies and inequality. And this is, I think, coming to an end, very important. Inequality as such is, of course, a moral problem. Inequality is something where we have to deal with justice, with values. But there is more to it. And this is, I think, something we have to evaluate, not only in terms of the numbers, not only in terms of what is going on, to which extent, but in terms of what is the law, what is the foundation in our productive systems that permanently establishes poverty, and where we do not have to look for moral statements to overcome it, but where we have to look for the objective factors to establish a different system of production, of economics, that takes into consideration the entirety of what is life about, of everyday life, and how it can be established in a way that we do not look for the growth of commodity production, which leads kind of automatically to this injustice and to this inequality, but where we are looking for another way of producing wealth in terms of the wealth of relationships, in the wealth of personality. That's it. Curiosity counts, and that's where we have to go. Thank you.
De la fin du passé, faisons table rase, foule esclave, debout, debout. Le monde va changer de race, nous ne sommes rien, soyons tous. C'est la lutte finale, groupons-nous, et demain, l'international sera le genre humain. Il n'est pas de sauveur suprême, ni Dieu, ni César, ni tribun. Travailleurs, sauvons-nous nous-mêmes, décrétons le salut commun.